Good morning, Mets fans, and welcome to a Monday edition of Driving with Mr. Met. I am Mr. Met, and after spending almost the entire weekend at my house with no power after a pretty nasty snowstorm on Friday, which knocked out our power at like 2:30 in the afternoon or 3 o'clock in the afternoon and didn't come back on until yesterday at 1:30 or so almost 2 whole days. The downside was that I got to miss most of the Mets spring training games, but after seeing the results, maybe that wasn't such a bad thing after all. But I want to talk a little bit about spring training and what it means and whether we should or shouldn't be freaking out as Mets fans right now. As Mets fans, it is in our very nature to freak out over pretty much everything. It's sort of like a rite of passage or par for the course or whatever. But I don't know. I don't know how to feel at this point about spring training. You know, a week ago, or a couple days ago, or whatever it was, I came on here and talked about how we need to not be so alarmed by wins and losses in spring training. You know, that doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter. These games don't count. You know, I've been sort of saying that, and that's always been my feeling as it pertains to spring training. For me, I'm just glad that there's baseball to watch, although as I have lamented, I have not been able to watch very much of it. But it's just sort of like that time of year when everything looks up and everything is chipper and whatever. But that being said, it's hard to not get concerned, even though I'm saying don't worry, these games don't matter. It's hard to not get concerned over what's been happening to Steven Matz. Small sample size, I know. Like, what, in 1.5 innings pitched over 2 starts, spring starts. He doesn't look like he's ready to pitch in the major leagues in the slightest. But to quote myself, this is spring training. We can't freak out because it's just spring training. I do have to admit, though, that I've been in sort of full-on alarmist mode myself. Now, again, I haven't been watching the games, so it's been hard to really judge how the team looks because I'm not seeing them. I hope that changes today. Friday, I had every intention of watching the game, and then the snow came and whatever. I couldn't. I had to go pick my son up and leave work early, and ended up turning into a nightmare of a weekend and didn't get to watch any Mets games. But I want to start watching. I've been watching some of the clips and some of the snippets. Watching Noah Syndergaard hit 100 miles an hour with relative ease in his first start of the spring, which, unlike everybody else, did not freak me out. Listening to Brian Ernie talk about it last week on Orange and Blue Thing, he summed it up pretty nicely. He sort of was like, look, these guys don't know how to dial it back. Like, it's not like he's going out there and exerting himself to throw 100 plus miles an hour. He's a professional athlete. He's probably got a better chance of getting hurt by pulling back a little bit than he would just letting it fly. So I liked that theory, that thought process at least. But with all of these nagging injuries that we've been hearing about and that they've been talking about, and with the team's win-loss record being what it is, and seeing some of the results from some of the starting pitchers and performances and whatnot, it's very easy to kind of fall back into the LOL Mets element of being a Mets fan, and I just don't think it's time for that. It's too early to be freaking out about this season, which it hasn't started and won't start for another 3.5 weeks. So let's not get completely worked up about what's going on in the spring. Let's not get worried about Steven Matz's terrible numbers. But let's understand that he has an opportunity in the spring to correct that and prove that he belongs in this rotation. The same goes for Dominic Smith. The same goes for Adrian Gonzalez. Any of these guys that are fighting for a spot on this team. That's what spring training is all about. It's not about winning games. It's not about hitting the most home runs. It's about getting to a position where you're ready to be an everyday contributor to a baseball team, and it's less about the results and more about the process. So not to affiliate anything that I'm about to say with Philadelphia sports in any capacity, but perhaps we have to trust the process. And not get so worked up and caught up in minutiae as it comes to spring training. So that'll do it for today. I will be back later this week with some more thoughts about where things stand in the spring. I want to talk a little bit about what the lineup might look like. I want to do that sooner rather than later. But I also don't want to jump the gun on that because we really don't know who's going to be on the 40-man and who's not, and who's going to be on the opening day roster and who's not. So maybe I'll give it a little bit of time before we get to talking about the roster itself and the lineup in particular. So that's coming up at some point. Maybe not this week, maybe next week, but we'll figure it out. Until then, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Follow me on Twitter if you're not already doing so, at Mr_Met. And as always, let's go Mets.